free will does not exist. Those are the first words I learned to read. Every morning, I woke up hearing them for years. They were written on a sign. They were hanging opposite the row of bunk beds that were in the sleeping barn. I have no memory of before the farm. I guess I was born here. None of the other kids knew why we were here or where we came from. No one knew how long we had been here either. Some kids got older and others didn't. I don't remember everything exactly, but that's what happens when you don't get the chance to make real memories. I was always desperately hungry. We were fed 3 times daily with small portions. And the director, Mr. Ranon Xenon, made sure that everyone saw him pour several drops of a clear liquid that was in an unmarked bottle. He poured its contents onto one meal. Then afterwards, he would hide behind a steel door and slide the trays through a small window. We didn't know if our meal was poisoned or not, so even if we were hungry, we weren't very enthusiastic about eating them. We had already seen several dozen children turn completely blue after getting the wrong tray. Just like me, there were many children who never touched that food. We preferred to eat animal carcasses or other dead things when we found them. In my life, I had eaten 4 crows, and often I ate flies, ants, flowers, cockroaches, and anything else I could find. Nothing edible escaped me. The only thing I didn't eat was spiders because I liked them. The 20 boys and 30 girls who worked in the fields provided most of the food that was eaten by the people on the farm. The farm was surrounded by a large wooden fence topped with barbed wire. Beyond it, only trees were visible as far as the eye could see. It looked like a real maze. Even though there were no spotlights or guards, the farm was much more secure than a prison. Every week, the director, Mr. Xenon, took about 100 of us and brought us to the foot of the big fence. Then he blew into a strange whistle. And all of a sudden, German shepherds with blood-colored eyes came out of the bushes as if they had been waiting for this eagerly. They had drool all around their mouths as they bared their jagged teeth at us, and they moved forward dangerously, as if they intended to eat us alive. The principal was smiling coldly, and I remember that once he told us,
"They're old dogs with rabies. I learned from one of us how to train them so that they only listen to me. And if you try to run away, they'll kill you, and believe me, that's the best thing they could do to you."
Besides, few people visited the farm. The only vehicle that came was a delivery truck that strangely looked like a prison bus. The noise the engine made really scared me. In any case, the driver only spoke to the principal. There was a rumor going around the farm saying that we weren't even real children, and that the principal, Xenon, was a demon who had created us from his own blood and a little bit of ash. No one dared to speak to the principal, and it never even occurred to us to ask questions. Because we knew that asking one meant getting slapped in the face. His hits were hard and painful, using his large hands to inflict unforgettable pain without needing much force. But more than the poisonings, the hard work, the hunt for food, and not really knowing why we existed, we were especially afraid of the night. Despite being utterly exhausted from working in the fields all day, the fear of sleeping still prevailed. When it was completely dark, we would suddenly hear the creaking sounds of the director's footsteps in the middle of the barn where we slept. Sometimes, we could even hear him walking on the roof, on the walls, or even on the ceiling. I still hear his breathing when I close my eyes. He breathed like a dying pig, struggling to get air into his lungs. He often continued until he heard someone cry. Then, you would just hear the person who had started crying scream one last time before the principal made them disappear. The missing children usually returned to the barn by morning, their bodies covered in purple marks. The event was never discussed. We were too afraid that the principal would hear and that we'd be the next ones to suffer the same fate. Sometimes when they grabbed us by the arm, they left the same mark as a hot iron would leave on an animal's skin. I was also marked on different parts of my body, but compared to some, I was lucky. I was one of the 4 boys and 5 girls who had to clean the principal's house. I cleaned the bathrooms and emptied the septic pit with a bucket. While cleaning the bathrooms, I discovered that some ceiling tiles moved when I stood on the toilets to clean the ceiling. and that made me think. I had experienced that for several years. To be honest, if I remember correctly, I felt like 25 winters had already passed, but we had no real way to actually define our age. Sometimes some of the children looked like they were 14 years old, and the next day, 6 years old. Time seemed to have no meaning on that farm. I knew I had to do something if I wanted to get out of there. So, the next morning, when I woke up with a new red mark made by the director's hand on the top of my arm, my frail and undernourished brain came up with a plan. I went to the place near the septic pit where I'd kept all the black widows I had found. I kept them behind a brick pit on the side of the farm. At one point, I had 8 of them, but I found out that if I put them together, they would eat each other. The strongest always survived. I kept doing these tournaments until I had only 26 spiders left, the ones that are the most poisonous. I was bitten twice, and both times I came very close to a very painful death. I knew a single bite wouldn't affect a monster like the director. Every day, I put my plan into action and it was almost ready. Until the day when, on a very cold December morning, everything changed. A black helicopter started circling above the farm, but then it left. The principal went insane. The following morning, he poisoned half the meals and lined us up by the wolf, near where they slaughtered chickens. I started running and a lot of other kids followed me. Judging by the screams, he caught a lot of them, but he didn't catch me. Though frightened, this was the moment I had always dreamed of. The day before, I had put the black widows in a chocolate box. I made sure to create compartments inside so they wouldn't eat each other. So I ran to get them. Then, I rushed to the principal's house. The principal's paranoia may have kept him awake, but even monsters need bathroom breaks. Then I lifted a panel from the false ceiling and hid inside with the box of chocolates. I waited there for a long time. The noise outside seemed to quiet down. Then, after long minutes that felt like hours, the principal arrived, and, luckily, he needed to go to the bathroom. I took advantage of the noise he made while pulling down his pants to move the ceiling tile. I waited for him to sit before unleashing the 26 horrible creatures above him. Terrified, all the black widows started biting the principal's head as soon as they landed on him. The terror of the children's farm, the demon named Xenon, was now on the ground, clinging to his toilet. His eyes had swollen and disgusting screams came out of his mouth, and the space made his body tremble before his swollen eyes closed completely. He saw me with my head sticking out of the false ceiling, and he started to laugh strangely.
I knew this could happen. There is no free will. It's okay. I've already lived 10,000 years. I've lived through your joyful summers, your wonderful weddings, and your fleeting successes. Your lives were beautiful, without a doubt. That's why I did.
He crushed one of the spiders crawling on his face with his hand, but I could see he was losing his strength. You and I are all ghosts now. Those were the last words I managed to understand. Before he stopped breathing, I remained concealed for a few more hours as a precaution. And I made sure there were no spiders around before going out the window. The black helicopter I had seen came back with armed men just before sunrise. I was the only survivor from the farm. The operations captain was a man named Clinton Moxley. He adopted me, and now I carry his last name. He also decided to call me Howard. I told my new father the little I knew, and he corrected me on some things. The director's name wasn't Xenon, his name was Clark Gaines. He was an unusual individual. The office my father worked for had spent time tracking down the director. My father was the one flying the helicopter. My father told me that once they had already captured the director, and that they had started studying him in a laboratory. He said that the director had touched one of the members, the oldest of the scientific team, whose name was Frank. He was 79 years old, and his skin was completely stretched. After seconds of agony, Frank looked like he was in his 40s again. He went on to say that he had forbidden his other agents from intervening. Frank, a renowned soldier, appeared defenseless before the director. Every time the director's hand touched Frank's skin, he screamed and became younger by the second. The director only stopped when Frank looked like a child dressed in an old person's clothes.
You know, he chose victims who had beautiful lives.
My father explained to me while he was tucking me in.
His existence is proof itself that time is just a physical dimension, something that exists and has always existed. He lived your years in just a few seconds, and all he left to Frank were the worst 9 years of his life. So yes, you might think that being young again is great and all that, but all he had left was the mind of a 9-year-old child with no memories, no family, no friends. Yeah, I think you know how he must have felt, right, Howard? Anyway, the place where I worked couldn't afford to take care of Frank. And from what little we know, we think the director is responsible for hundreds of thousands of orphaned children like you without a home or ties all around the world.
I asked my father why he adopted me. So he took me to the bathroom, which had a double mirror, and asked me to take off my t-shirt.
Why did I adopt you? Because I owe it to you. So what I'm about to tell you might sound a little crazy, but after everything we've been through together, it's time you knew the truth. Actually, a long time ago you were an old man, Howard. You were my mentor, my partner. You went to that farm to try to stop all of this. I really wish you could remember, that you could remember even just one thing about your past. But the director didn't give you that chance.
I looked at the mirror behind me, and that's when I saw my back for the first time. It was covered in handprints. All of that happened years ago, really a lot of years ago. And just like the principal told me, I felt like a ghost among the living. I was having a hard time sleeping, and more now. For the past few nights, I've been hearing the principal's footsteps, as well as his breathing right next to my old man's bed. My father told me they never found the principal's body. But I know he wants to get his farm back. I also know he's looking for me because he's hungry and needs to feed again.